Today, I am delighted to be joined by Andrew Noble, who is a partner and member of PAR Equity's Investment Committee. Founded in 2008, the PAR Equity investment model is designed to identify and back the most innovative, high-growth technology companies in the north of the UK. PAR Equity are based in Edinburgh and invest in companies across Northern England, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. Andrew, hello and welcome.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you very much for having me.
Andrew, to start with, can you tell us a bit about PAR Equity and its background?
Yes, of course. So PAR Equity, as you've mentioned, was founded in 2008. So we've been going for what is now 15 years, investing into high quality, high potential, early stage technology companies. Ever since day dot, and I suppose this is one of the ways that separates us from other venture capitalists and EIS funds in the market, is that we've always tried to combine the very best bits of angel investing with the professionalism, the rigor, and the scale of committed capital that ordinarily comes from venture capital firms. And so if you fast forward over 15 years, we've now got this incredible pool of 220 elected professional investors, many of whom have started, grown, and sold their own businesses, and are now recycling that capital and expertise back into the next generation of companies. And we found that that's a force multiplier for us as a VC firm. So what we get is actually this incredible network of scouts in the market, bringing us high quality opportunities all across the north of the UK. And we also use that expertise as part of our investment selection and due diligence process. And then what it gives us once we've invested into those target companies is this incredible pool of talent, which we use for portfolio management. And so across our portfolio of 49 companies, we've got 41 operating partners on the boards of those companies as well.
Andrew, the PAR EIS fund launched in 2012 and the KI fund more recently. Can you tell us how much has been raised and how many companies PAR have invested into to date?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've invested in a total of 77 companies since inception. We launched our EIS fund in 2012, and our EIS fund has invested into 51 companies in total since then. In terms of total amount raised through our EIS fund, we've raised more than 30 million to date, but that has scaled up quite significantly in the past few years. So in the 21-22 tax year, we raised close to 10 million, and we anticipate raising the same amount again this year. One of the reasons why we've scaled it up quite considerably is that we have found that with a growing presence and profile in the market, and particularly as we've started to get that flywheel going since 2013 when we made our very first exit, we've pulled in more opportunities through our network and through our brand profile across the north of the UK, and we're able to deploy more capital. So in 2022, as an example, we deployed 38 million of capital into the early stage technology ecosystem across the north of the UK. And one of the most pleasing things to see as well, which has triggered an increase in the fundraising across PAR, is that we've been recognized across the industry as one of the leading angel groups and also EIS managers too, picking up the Best Angel Group of the Year award from the UK Business Angel Association in 2021, and also the Best EIS Investment Manager Award at the 2021 and 2022 EIS Association Awards as well. So it's really pleasing to see the development of the business grow in that direction. And yeah, we're looking forward to the next few years ahead for PAR and our portfolio.
Now, PAR are based in Edinburgh and target investments in Scotland and the north of England. Why do you focus on these areas?
Yeah, I think the principal reason is that we've got a team of 18, 10 in the investment team and 41 operating partners. And the principal reason is that we like to be close to our investments. So we're quite an active hands-on investor. We attend board meetings and we try and add as much value as we can to early stage technology companies. So that's the key reason. But there is, of course, an upshot to that. And put simply, there is a supply and demand thought process to this. Taking a step back, around about 25 billion of capital has gone into early stage businesses through the venture capital ecosystem in the UK in the last couple of years. Now, 70% of that capital goes to London-based businesses, and only 9% goes to the north of the UK. And that runs in stark contradiction with the great work done by the Scale Up Institute, for example, which actually showcases there are 50% more identified scale-ups in the north of the UK than there are in London. So we're seeing that this part of the market is grossly underserved by VCs. We can see very, very high quality deal flow. And on a like-for-like basis, we're actually getting into and investing into companies at better valuations. And at the end of the day, as an investor, entry prices are absolutely critical to driving strong returns. And that's what we've been able to deliver over the last 12 to 15 years.
Andrew, what sectors do PAR invest into and why?
Yeah, so we're actually not sector driven. We are technology driven investors. So we look out for companies that are B2B, have B2B business models, and generally have a technology which is IP rich, or as we call it in the industry, deep tech or tough tech. What that means is that we are principally looking for really strong innovation in areas such as generative AI, machine learning, photonics, robotics, advanced materials. These sorts of areas get us really excited about the opportunities, the disruptive nature of that technology, and the opportunity for it on a global scale. What that means in principle is that some of these technologies can straddle many different markets. So integrated graphene is one example of that, an advanced material nanotechnology, which has applications both within human diagnostics in the sort of health tech market, but then also in supercapacitors, so in sort of clean tech and EV. Fundamentally, our investment strategy covers three main areas: climate tech, health tech, and Industry 4.0. And those are the areas that we typically will support, and we see great opportunity going forward.
And what stage are the companies at that PAR invests into, and what's a typical investment size?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. We will these days invest at seed to sort of early Series A and participating in bigger Series A funds and also Series B and beyond. We typically lead most of the deals. So around about 75% of the transactions that we're involved in, we are the lead investor because we have the skills and the capabilities in the team to do that, and we bring in co-investors on the deals that the deals that we can. We typically write tickets as a group of anything between 500,000 and 4 million in investment rounds into these companies. And the round sizes are typically between 1 and 10 million. So that gives you a bit of a flavor for the sort of funding makeup of the types of companies that we target. In terms of revenue numbers, what that means is that most of the companies we back are in revenue. So they're achieving revenue run rates of between 20 and 200,000 pounds per month. Often, on average, it's around about 70 or 80,000. So a lot of the companies that we back for the first time are already at that £1 million of revenue run rate. So these are technologies that are already being proven in the market at reasonable scale. And in terms of FTE numbers, on average, when we're investing for the first time, those companies have around about 20 to 30 FTE on average. So these are not sort of startups with, or entrepreneurs with a good idea. These are companies that have already been taken to market and developed, teams being built out, and they are looking for capital to scale up their operations and really get after the opportunity that's in front of them.
Now, PAR operates an angel network alongside your EIS fund. How does this work in practice, and what benefits do you think that it brings?
Yeah, so I suppose I've touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but just to sort of reaffirm that, we really see it helping us across the four touch points of the investment life cycle. That starts at the very beginning, which is that deal origination point. And by having 220 members of our investor network and also a broader PAR advisory community across the north of the UK, what we find is that we've created a deal origination engine for ourselves. So a lot of these individuals will understand what makes a PAR deal, filter for them, and then bring us opportunities, either companies that they've invested in earlier or companies where a young entrepreneur has reached out to that individual for mentorship as well as capital. And those individuals in our PAR Invest network will bring them to us, as part of their appetite to make an investment into that company. So we get pre-screened high quality deals through that network. The second area is in that deal selection and due diligence phase. So often, and we're always very conscious of this, VC firms are small teams, relatively speaking. And so there is the potential to suffer from groupthink. Now, we used members of our investor network who have industry and technology domain expertise in the relevant field for an opportunity. And what that helps is give us additional insight into the business and the business model and the technology. And that helps us avoid any kind of predefined thinking that we might have on an opportunity, but also helps us explore new avenues in which we can take that business. As part of our investment process, we will ask whether those individuals in our investor network are going to invest alongside us through the Power Investor Network and or through the Power EIS Fund. That is a key additional part of our investment selection and governance process. And so effectively, we're asking those individuals to put the money where their mouth is, and it's an extra layer of selection that we go through. Our third stage is once we've made that investment is the portfolio management piece. And I mentioned earlier, we've got 41 operating partners from the investor network who are sitting on the boards, adding value to these companies. And effectively, it's a very big bench of experts and individuals who we can draft into each individual company on a case-by-case basis, depending on the needs of that company at a moment in time. And finally, the exit management process, that last touch point in the sort of investment lifecycle. What we find, and we can point to case studies where when companies are achieving their growth rates and they're at that inflection point, they're scaling very quickly. There's no shortage of acquisition interest in those businesses. However, when companies are not achieving that sort of considerable momentum, it's very hard to know how to get this business to an exit. And so what we've used in the past is the investor network to understand, okay, in the hands of an acquirer, how can this technology obtain significant value for them? And so in a couple of instances, we've been able to use that network, create the right introductions to a potential buyer, and then achieve an exit for that company that perhaps hasn't been hitting the lights out in terms of its sales revenue and traction, but that technology sits very nicely in the hands of a global business with a global sales force to exploit the technology in a way that we couldn't before, and then also achieve a liquidity event for our underlying investors and return capital to them. So it really does help, and it gives us a force multiplier in the way that we operate Power Equity as a business.
How many companies would an investor expect to have in his or her portfolio, and how frequently are deployments made?
Yeah, so we've set both the EIS fund and the KI EIS fund up on very similar investment strategies, but obviously offering the underlying investor slightly different tax profiles. Both vehicles will provide the investors with deployment into 8 companies. We have a target deployment period of 12 months, but actually what we've demonstrated over the last 4 or 5 years is that we typically deploy an investor's money and reach full deployment within a 6 to 9 month period. And that demonstrates the high quality deal flow that we have coming through and the opportunities that we see in that we are well within our deployment timeframes. Now, one thing that's particularly interesting about that with regard to our KI fund is that you can invest into our KI fund, and what you will do is obviously achieve the sort of carry back that you're looking for to the previous tax year as part of your tax planning. But also, if we deploy the KI fund within a 12-month period, you get the EIS 5 back quite quickly because our deployment rates are very, very strong. So it's a key consideration that a number of investors have pointed this out as an attractive feature for them as well.
Andrew, can you talk about any exits Power has delivered today, and are you able to provide some color on unrealized performance?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been operating our EIS fund for what is now 10 years. So as you can expect, we've achieved a number of exits through our EIS fund and delivered successfully well above our benchmark return of 15% IRR. A few exits come to mind within that. So Current Health, very good exit for investors. That was Europe's second largest digital healthcare exit. We sold Current Health for $400 million in October 2021. Current Health were, and they still are, producing a remote patient monitoring device. It was being sold into hospital groups and large pharma, and really helped them understand the health of the patient at home and in real time. The technology itself was effectively a biosensor which sits on the patient's arm, relatively inintrusive. But what it allowed them to do was to have a Trojan horse piece of technology. So the hardware would pick up all the vital signs of the patient, and then they would use an underlying technology using advanced artificial intelligence to then understand predictive analytics on that patient. And they opened up the architecture to allow another 150 wearable devices to feed data into that as well. So it became an increasingly and very powerful tool for physicians and large pharma to understand how patients were in the comfort of their own home. And it was proven to save lives in the field as well. So as a technology is a force for good, a very, very successful outcome for investors, PAR investors as well. And we were delighted with that outcome. We've made other successful exits, including Optoscribe, Symphonic Trust, Delta DNA, PathXL, and so on and so forth. So we have a very good track record returning cash back to investors, and we've done that every year since 2013. Your second part of your question was, some color on the unrealized performance of the portfolio. We've got a portfolio of a total of 49 companies across PAR. I believe the subset for the EIS fund is around about 33 in there, or maybe 35 now. And the underlying portfolio is performing really actually quite well. We run a quarterly sort of diagnostic on the portfolio amongst the team, and we aggregate all the scores up. And actually, despite the market being slightly harder to raise funding for early stage technology companies right now, most of our companies are performing well on commercial and operational points. So we're reasonably pleased with that. And we have a number of companies within the portfolio that are scaling quite quickly.
Well, can you highlight a recent investment and the reasoning behind it?
Yeah. One that comes to mind that I can speak in a little bit more detail about is Nova Pangaea Technologies. This is a really interesting climate tech business based in Teesside. We invested first time round in 2017 when we took the technology, which is a very clever chemical engineering process, out of the lab and into a demonstration plant. And we invested again in the sort of third or fourth quarter of last year as part of their bridging round towards a 20 to 30 million pound raise. What Nova Pangaea Technologies has been able to do is effectively take woody and plant-based residue and convert it very, very quickly and with high efficacy rates into a bioethanol and into a sustainable aviation fuel with one of their partners, LanzaJet. Taking a step back, the commercial aviation market produces around about 2.5% of our global carbon emissions. Sustainable aviation fuel is able to reduce that by 80% without any reconfiguration of the jet engines themselves. So it's a really disruptive piece of technology that can be brought to market and also help solve the climate crisis that we're experiencing today. The business is making significant traction. They have a partnership with British Airways and LanzaJet to produce 110 million litres of sustainable aviation fuel in the next 5 years. And they're building out their first plant, Nova One, right now, and will look to scale that over the next 3 to 5 years. So a fascinating business, growing extremely quickly, and obviously has very strong green credentials as well.
Andrew, finally, for today, can you share some examples of investments in the portfolio that are scaling quickly?
Well, I've talked about one, which is MPT, but I'm happy to talk about others. Off the top of my head, we've got Integrated Graphene. It's a business based in Sterling. They have managed to unlock the mass production of 3D graphene foam. Graphene as a material was invented and discovered out of Manchester in 2004. And a lot of people haven't really understood how to grow it commercially, grow it to a significant scale with high purity rates so that it becomes commercially viable. Today, integrated graphene have been able to do that. So they can grow it on any surface at room temperature, producing very, very high purity rates, and they can do that at scale. And what that's done is opened up two markets to integrated graphene. One is human diagnostics, so they can effectively produce a material which replaces gold on biosensors for human diagnostic firms. That is extremely exciting because the material it comes in at a lower cost and also has better qualities as a conductive material than gold itself. The second is supercapacitors, so it's able to charge and release energy and also take on energy much faster. So for supercapacitors in electric vehicles, for example, it has the potential to significantly improve the rate at which people can charge their cars in the future as well. And their beachhead market within that is actually within smart labels. So having a tracking device for high value, expensive products that are being sent around the world and being able to understand where it is and its geolocation and the temperature of that product and so on and so forth in real time. So a business which is growing extremely fast, very disruptive piece of technology that has applications across a number of fields. I'm probably running out of time, so I'll give you one more as well. Another company in our portfolio is a company called Fuse. This company provides software which is hardware agnostic to the electric vehicle charging industry. So a lot of the charge point manufacturers and operators are not necessarily software experts. Fuse has been able to build out a very interesting piece of software which helps solve a number of the problems that we're reading about in the press today. So the software itself, as I mentioned, is hardware agnostic. So when you turn up at different charge points with your car, you're able to use different charge points using that software. So that's the first big tick. Second of all, it's able to self-heal remotely. So when you arrive at a charge point, if you have an EV car, you find that it's gone down, well, the Fuse software is able to automate that self-healing process and get that charge point back up online and making sure the infrastructure is there and serving drivers much better. Third of all, what they can do is that for companies that operate large fleets and they have their employees using those fleets, they can understand what those employees are using and charging in their own homes. So they can say, right, we know the amount of electricity that you've charged at home and we will reimburse you for that. Equally, for employees that are coming in and using the office, those employees are able to understand what their benefits are and kind are of using the charging infrastructure at those companies as well. So it solves a whole heap of problems in the industry. The business is growing at about 20 to 30% month on month. We first invested about a year ago, and we're actually investing the EIS fund again at the end of this tax year as part of its seed extension round. So a really, really interesting business, and we're obviously very excited about the future of it.
Some great companies there. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. Pleasure being here.